California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell is now one of two lawmakers who announced yesterday they are planning to resign from Congress. Swalwell is facing sexual assault and other misconduct allegations from several women. He has denied the allegations, but along with resigning from Congress, he has suspended his run for governor in California. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes spoke with two of those women, as well as a third woman who helped bring the story to the public's attention on social media in their first TV interview.
I didn't tell anybody for years, out of fear.
What were you afraid of?
Well, at first I thought I was all alone.
Annika Albrecht was still in college when she says she got what she thought was a big break. California Congressman Eric Swalwell offering to stay in touch after meeting with her student group in Washington, D.C.
He offered to mentor me.
Wow.
That was, as someone who knew virtually nothing about politics at the time, or no one, that was just an incredibly generous offer that I felt very lucky to have.
She says Swalwell created a group chat with all the students and then added her as a friend on the messaging app Snapchat.
And so I asked the other people that were in the meeting, did he add them? And they said no.
Were they all men?
Yes. I was the only woman in the meeting.
She says Swalwell, who was then in his late 30s, started out talking politics, but his messages soon turned flirtatious.
Ultimately, it reached a point where he invited me to a hotel to meet him. It was very clear what the connotation was. At that point, I completely stopped responding. What I keep thinking back to is how lucky I am that I didn't go to that hotel.
Alisa Marco says she had a similar experience in 2021. She sent Swalwell a supportive message on Twitter, and to her surprise, he messaged right back.
I was so excited. I was a low-level staffer who had no real political background, and he was this established figure in Democratic politics.
They began to text, but she says he soon asked if she too was on Snapchat, where messages and photos automatically get deleted after they're viewed.
How did the tenor of his conversation change?
It started out as professional and platonic, and then slowly they became more and more explicit, asking me what I was wearing. Then one night he was on a trip and he was laying in his hotel room bed, and then he sent me a photo of his penis.
Samarco showed us text messages she sent to friends at the time about Swalwell's alleged advances. In one, she wrote, "He's snapping me right now, asking when he can see me." But beyond that, both women said little for years as they built careers as Democratic campaign strategists.
I was terrified that if I spoke out against him, then people would think that I was a loose cannon, that I couldn't be trusted, that maybe I'm making it up.
That was until Swalwell decided to run for governor of California.
I'm Eric Swalwell, and it's this simple.
And quickly moved to the top of the pack.
The idea that this man who has already abused his power would be given even more power and could potentially harm even more women made my whole body sick.
So, 2 weeks ago, Albrecht reached out to her good friend Cheyenne Hunt, a Democratic content creator, and asked her to post a video about the rumors that have dogged Swalwell for years.
The Democratic candidate currently leading in the California governor's race has a known history of being predatory towards women. I could never have guessed where it would lead us.
Where did it lead?
I was immediately slammed with DMs from other women who said, "I have a story to tell." And that was when I realized that this was a lot bigger than I think any of us knew.
Swalwell has acknowledged what he called mistakes of judgment, but denied all allegations of sexual misconduct.
They have never happened, and I will fight them with everything that I have.
And yet on Sunday, he suspended his bid for governor, and yesterday announced his plan to resign from Congress.
Is that justice in your view?
I think we just prevented another 30 to 40 years potentially of him harming people if he were to stay in Congress.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think we have served justice for his future victims. Wow. That won't exist anymore.
Nancy Cordes is here with more of that conversation. Nancy, incredible job with the interview.
Yes.
It's a really sensitive subject. Really appreciate you bringing us that. There was a little bit of it in the piece of how Swalwell is reacting to this, but how are he and other congressional lawmakers responding?
Well, at first, he sort of went after the women. He said that these women who were coming forward were working with MAGA Republicans, that maybe they were working with a rival campaign. A few of the women who spoke to CNN anonymously early on got cease and desist letters from his lawyers. So there was some fear at first about what this was going to mean for them, as there always is when women are in a situation like this, or anyone is in a situation like this where they feel like they need to come forward. But what really encouraged them to persevere was the fact, that there were so many other women who were telling them stories that sounded so similar to what they had experienced. In fact, at one point, Annika told me last night, I felt like I wasn't crazy anymore because I was talking to all these women on the phone who said, oh, yeah, he told me to go to Snapchat, too, and he started sending me similar messages. So I think that was, while it was sad to hear that the community was larger than they thought, it was also comforting to know that she was believed and that she hadn't sort of misunderstood the signals that she was getting from him all those years ago.
Nancy, I know you saw Congresswoman Elise Stefanik on CBS Mornings earlier today, and it was an interesting moment when Nora and Gail asked the Congresswoman if members of Congress were perhaps aware that if this was sort of an unspoken secret, not just with Eric Swalwell, but with Tony Gonzalez and perhaps others. And her answer was sort of interesting. She referenced Kevin McCarthy removing Swalwell from a key committee a few years ago around allegations that I think had to do with a member, with another woman. And I just wondered if you are hearing that now, because one of the things that we were talking about yesterday is just how quickly members of Swalwell's own party came out and said that they were distancing themselves from him.
Yeah, I covered the Hill for a long time, and certainly Eric Swalwell was an outspoken and up-and-coming member. And, while there were stories about him, usually, they had to do with, was he talking to other women? I think that there was this assumption that, maybe he was promiscuous and that kind of thing. But when I talked to the women last night, what they said was that for younger women, for women their age, in their early 20s, there was sort of there was a rumor mill that existed that went far beyond what I or maybe other women who worked on the Hill or covered the Hill had heard. They said that they were told point blank, don't engage with him on social media, don't meet him out somewhere, don't meet him at a hotel, because these stories had percolated at that point among younger women in particular, either interns or people who were just starting out their careers, either working for him or another Democratic member of Congress.
And you often hear that similar storyline, regardless of the industry, when something like that happens.
That's
that
right.
Those younger women are told, don't do this. So there is the knowledge that something, is going on. Nancy Cordes, thank you so much for bringing us that interview.
You're welcome.